"Get out of my way or the engineer dies." Theo Wain did not move. I said move. The Vorrkai operative pressed the barrel of his weapon harder against Lenthar Bassett's temple. She did not flinch. She had been working extraction platforms in contested deep space for 6 years, and she had developed, over that time, a particular economy of reaction that the people around her sometimes mistook for calm and sometimes mistook for indifference. It was neither. It was the specific discipline of someone who had learned that panic costs more than it spends. Theo Wain was standing 12 feet away at the entrance to Junction Corridor 7, holding a maintenance diagnostic tablet. He was wearing a gray technician's coverall with a small Sci-Fi Spacetails patch on the left shoulder. The standard issue uniform of contracted civilian personnel aboard the Lenthar Deep Extraction Platform, a facility owned jointly by the Meridian Compact and the Vorrkai Collective, and positioned by deliberate treaty engineering in a stretch of mid-belt space that neither side could legally claim as sovereign territory. The platform had been operational for 8 years. Its purpose was resource extraction. Its secondary purpose, unwritten but understood by everyone who had designed it, was to function as a standing proof that two species that did not entirely trust each other could, when sufficiently motivated by profit, share the same oxygen supply without incident. The incident arrived at ZO 614 station time on a morning when the platform's administrative shift had not yet fully turned over, and the corridor network on sublevel 4 was running at 40% occupancy. There were 9 of them. They had arrived on a registered supply hauler, which was not unusual. Supply haulers arrived at Lenthar 6 times a week, carrying equipment, personnel, and cargo that the platform's manifest system logged automatically. What the manifest system had not logged, because the documentation was exceptionally well prepared, was that the 9 individuals who disembarked from hauler designate VK1108 were not supply contractors. They were Vorrkai Retrieval Corps, the enforcement arm of the Collective's Interior Ministry, which was not the same as the Collective's military, which would have triggered the platform's alert protocols, and which operated under a sufficiently different set of procedural rules that the distinction mattered in ways the platform's treaty architects had not fully anticipated. The Retrieval Corps did not require the same pre-authorization as military assets. The treaty did not specify them. The treaty had been written by people who did not entirely foresee what the Vorrkai Interior Ministry would eventually ask its retrieval arm to do. What they had come to do was collect a Vorrkai national named Res Halvarin, who was currently in the platform's medical bay with 3 cracked ribs and a concussion, and who had arrived 11 days ago on a personal transit permit and had told the platform's intake processing officer, in a voice that was doing its best not to shake, that he could not go back. The platform's intake officer had documented this carefully, applied the standard compact non-removal medical hold, and notified the duty administrator. The duty administrator had notified the platform's security liaison. The platform's security liaison was Theo Wain. Theo was 31 years old, which was younger than the position typically went to, and he had been assigned to Lenthar 14 months ago in a way that his official transfer documentation described as a standard compact deployment rotation, and that several people who had processed his file had found, on second reading, somewhat underspecified in the details. His certifications listed him as a General Operations and Security Coordinator. His performance reviews described him as reliable, efficient, and capable of operating well in isolated environments with minimal oversight. His file did not mention the 4 years he had spent with the Joint Task Force 2 before that, or the operational record that went with those years, or the specific set of skills that record represented, because that portion of Theo Wain's professional history was maintained in a separate documentation system that General Compact HR access did not reach. He had been on Lenthar for 14 months without a significant incident. He looked in his gray coverall, with his diagnostic tablet, like exactly what his file said he was. The Vorrkai Retrieval Team Commander, a senior operative named Drevith Call, had assessed Theo Wain in roughly 4 seconds upon encountering him in the corridor. Compact technician, unarmed appearance, standard issue personal communicator, non-military posture. Call had spent 11 years in the Retrieval Corps and had operated in compact-adjacent territory 17 times. He had a framework for the kinds of humans he typically encountered in these environments. The assessment was not correct. Call's instruction was the instruction of someone who believed they had already resolved the tactical picture. Step aside. The weapon was against the engineer's head as a demonstration of the cost of not complying. The 9 operatives behind him were positioned to manage any remaining variables. Last chance, Call said. Theo set the diagnostic tablet down on the corridor shelf beside him. He did this without hurry, with the specific quality of someone completing a small administrative task before moving on to the next one. He said, "There are 9 of you. I've counted. The 2 at the back are watching the corridor exit, not me, which means they're covering a retreat route that you've already planned. That tells me you didn't expect this to take long." Call's weapon did not move. "Step aside. The thing is," Theo said, in a tone that was conversational without being casual, "I'm the platform's security liaison, which means Res Halvarin's medical hold is my documentation. If you take him, that documentation travels with him. Every injury he had when he arrived here, dated, witnessed, signed by 3 medical staff members. Whatever happens to him after he leaves my platform becomes officially subsequent to a documented record that exists in compact medical archives." A pause. "I'm telling you this," Theo said, "because I want you to understand the full cost of the next 30 seconds before they happen." Call processed this for approximately 2 seconds. In his experience, people who were buying time said things designed to sound significant. In his experience, that time was used by backup that was on its way. He had already calculated that the platform's security response time from the nearest backup station was 4 minutes. He had 4 minutes. He was not wrong about the backup time. He was wrong about what 4 minutes meant in this specific corridor with this specific person. What happened next was recorded by Junction Corridor 7's internal monitoring system, and later reviewed by a compact security analysis team that spent 2.5 hours on the footage before submitting a report describing the sequence as exhibiting non-standard response, tempo and movement economy inconsistent with general security contractor profiles. The report noted that the subject had demonstrated a level of threat prioritization and close-quarters execution that suggested substantially more specialized prior training than the subject's official documentation indicated. The report also noted that the subject had at no point been in possession of anything other than a maintenance diagnostic tablet. The tablet had not been used as a weapon, exactly. Its use had been more incidental than that, in the way that objects in the hands of someone who moves very quickly sometimes become part of the geometry of a situation without being the primary instrument of it. The first 3 operatives between Theo and Lena Bassett were no longer standing before Call had processed that Theo had moved at all. The movement had not been telegraphed. There had been no shift in posture, no narrowing of focus, no perceptible change in the quality of attention Theo was paying to the room. He had set down the tablet, said his piece, and then he was somewhere else entirely, and the tactical picture Call had constructed was no longer accurate in several significant ways. The weapon was removed from Lena's temple, not by negotiation, by a specific application of force to the joint of Call's wrist that Theo had practiced at various points in his life, in training facilities in Petawawa, and in field conditions in places that his official file did not specify, and which he had now applied in a corridor on a deep space extraction platform in the mid-belt. The mechanics were identical. The geometry of it did not change because the location did. Call found himself on the floor of Junction Corridor 7, with his weapon in a hand that was not his, and with the specific understanding of someone whose tactical picture has been comprehensively revised. The remaining operatives stopped. Lena Bassett, who had not moved during the 41 seconds, looked at the 8 Vorrkai operatives in various positions of incapacitation around her, and then at Theo, who was standing between her and the corridor entrance with an expression that was the operational equivalent of neutral. The face of someone who has completed a task and is now in the assessment phase. "You were quiet," she said. "I didn't want to give them time to adjust their positioning," he said. She looked at the corridor, at the operatives, at the diagnostic tablet which had ended up approximately 6 feet from where Theo had set it down and which she chose not to ask about. "The 2 at the back." "Secured," he said. "They moved toward the exit when I crossed the corridor." "That's what I thought they'd do." "You counted them before you walked in." "I counted them when I picked up the tablet," he said. "There were 9. There are still 9. The math worked out." Lena looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone recalibrating an assessment. She had worked with Theo Wain for 14 months. She had thought she had a reasonable picture of who he was. The platform's alert system had triggered at second 9. Security backup arrived at the 4-minute mark, which was exactly on schedule, and which found 9 Vorrkai Retrieval Corps operatives secured in Junction Corridor 7, 1 senior extraction engineer continuing her walk to Sublevel 3 as though she had simply been briefly delayed, and 1 security liaison completing his initial incident documentation with the same quality of attention he brought to everything else. The Meridian Compact filed a formal complaint with the Vorrkai Collective's Interior Ministry within 2 hours. The collective's initial response characterized the operation as a lawful retrieval action under Interior Code 17, subsection 4. The Compact's response to the response was 63 pages and cited 11 treaty provisions. The back and forth would continue for several months at the diplomatic level. The Retrieval Corps filed its own operational debrief. That document, which Compact intelligence accessed through channels that the debrief's authors would have found unsettling, described the platform's security liaison as presenting a non-standard engagement profile and recommended that future operations in Compact-adjacent territory account for the possibility of embedded specialist assets operating under civilian cover designations. It was, in the specific vocabulary of the Vorrkai Retrieval Corps, the language used for something they had encountered that did not fit their existing categories. They did not attempt another retrieval operation from Lenthar platform. Res Halvarin was discharged from the medical bay 17 days after the incident, on the determination of the platform's chief medical officer that his injuries had resolved sufficiently to permit transfer. The discharge documentation included a complete medical witness record, every injury catalogued on arrival, every treatment administered, every observation made by every staff member, dated and co-signed by Theo Wain in his capacity as security liaison. The record existed in Compact archives. It existed in 3 redundant backup systems. It existed in a form that meant that whatever happened to Res Halvarin in whatever came next, the before was documented in a way that could not be quietly revised. Theo did not tell Res Halvarin this directly. He stood in the corridor outside the medical bay when the discharge was being processed. And he said, when Res asked him what would happen, "The record travels with you. Anyone who touches you now touches it too." Res looked at him for a moment in the way that someone looks at a sentence that means more than its words. "Will that be enough?" Res asked. Theo considered the honest answer to that question. "It makes it harder," he said. "That's not nothing." He found her in the platform's common observation area that evening. Lena Bassett was sitting at one of the long windows that faced the extraction field, holding a mug of something the platform's food synthesizer produced that was approximately coffee in the ways that mattered. The observation area was empty except for her. The extraction field moved slowly outside, the way it always did, indifferent to the specific events of specific days. Theo set a second mug on the table and sat across from her. She didn't say anything for a moment. This was not unusual. Lena Bassett was not someone who filled silence with words that didn't need to be there, which was one of the things about her that Theo had registered early in his posting, and that had made the 14 months considerably easier than some of the postings before it. "You've done that before," she said finally. "Not a question." "Yes," he said. "Not here. No, not here." He looked at the extraction field. "Other places, JTF too," she said. He looked at her. "I looked at your file properly after the incident in month 3, she said. "The official file. And then I looked at the parts the official file doesn't mention, because I know what those blank spaces mean. I did 8 years with the Royal Canadian Navy before I went into extraction work." She turned the mug in her hands. "I know what a file looks like when someone has been somewhere their file isn't allowed to say." Theo was quiet for a moment. In 14 months on this platform, and in the 3 years of Compact posting before it, and in the 4 years before that which his file did not specify, no one had simply read the blank spaces and named them. People asked about operational outcomes, about documentation, about what the situation required. No one asked about the spaces. "You didn't say anything," he said. "It wasn't my information to say anything about." She looked at him. "It also wasn't relevant to anything the platform needed until today." He turned his own mug on the table. "It was relevant in month 3. Month 3 was a supply discrepancy," she said. "I didn't need JTF2 for a supply discrepancy. I needed someone who could keep a clear head while we were being shortchanged on recycler units, and you did that." A pause. "You did it well." Theo thought about that. The specific quality of being assessed accurately. Not the version of assessment that produces either inflated confidence or false modesty, but the version that simply says, "Here is what you are, here is what that means, here is what it was useful for." He had not experienced that version often. He had not realized until now how much that absence had accumulated. "The 9 in the corridor," Lena said. 41 seconds, he said. "I know, I counted." He looked at her. "I count things," she said, with the tone of someone who finds this unremarkable. "Occupancy levels, transit schedules, response windows. You counted 9 operatives, I counted 41 seconds. It's the same instinct." He thought about that for a moment. "You weren't afraid," he said. "Not an accusation. more of an observation that had been sitting in the back of his assessment since the corridor. "I was afraid," she said. "I was also standing in a corridor with my hands visible and my weight distributed and making sure I wasn't going to be grabbed because the person behind me needed a clear field." She looked at him steadily. "I didn't spend 8 years in the Navy without learning where to put my feet." He had not known that exactly. He had known some version of it. The way she moved, the way she read rooms, the particular quality of attention she brought to spaces that most people moved through without thinking. He had filed it under professional competence and left it there. He was revising the filing. "The record I put in for Res," he said after a moment. "I can add supplementary documentation. If he ends up in a collective processing facility, there are compact legal observers who receive copies. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it makes it harder," Lena said with the tone of someone completing a sentence she had heard before. "And that's not nothing." "No," he said. "It's not." Outside, the extraction field turned slowly through the mid-belt dark. The synthesizer coffee was acceptable, which on a deep space platform was a reasonable definition of good. The incident reports had been filed. The diplomatic channels had been opened. The things that could be done had been done, and the things that couldn't had been acknowledged honestly, which was the most that any particular situation usually allowed for. Neither of them said anything for a while after that. Theo did not have a name for what this was, the specific quality of sitting in a room with someone who had read your blank spaces and not made anything of them except an accurate assessment, and who had, when a corridor full of operatives had needed managing, put her feet in the right place and let you work. He had been in a lot of rooms in his life. He had been in this kind of room approximately once before, years ago, in a context that the mid-belt had nothing to do with, and which had ended the way things ended when the posting changed. He was not thinking about that. He was thinking about the extraction field, and the coffee, and the particular quality of a silence that did not require anything from either person in it. It was, Theo thought, the most grounded he had felt in 14 months on a platform that was, by design, exactly equidistant from everywhere that mattered.